Hi everyone, Mature Simmer here. So it looks like when I dropped this off yesterday, somehow it was not loading up, so just finishing filling up the water here. So, big news to share. Well, not as exciting as big news sounds, but I did get notified by my other daily work, Nav, that after our 2 years, we're done. He's done what he needs, but he's decided he's kind of re-looking at what he's doing here in Farmers Only Club, and he's thinking of downsizing, so he doesn't need me to do stuff. He was happy with what I did, said if I need any references or whatever, he'd be happy to provide them if people are asking. He thought I did an excellent job, but just no services are no longer needed. So, kind of dovetailing into what I was talking about at the end of the last episode of, I think I've got a path forward FM-wise, maybe going ahead and building a farm based around the assumption that I'm going to go ahead and use AI workers regularly. The benefit of that, obviously, is exactly this type of thing. This is the danger with any work for other folks, is that work can just end. He really hadn't said anything, and then suddenly, as I was working on things last night, I just got a message from him that, hey, our time has ended, we've come to the end of the time we agreed on. I'm not going to need you going forward. I'm looking at downsizing and maybe taking a break. So he may step away entirely for a bit and just not even do anything. And that is, I think, something that isn't really not possible within Farmers Only Club. There were rules within FSN that if you were inactive for basically 30 real days, so it was in essence like two and a half game years, or basically every third year you didn't do something on your farm, you could be removed to make room for someone who is more active. But I don't know that I've seen anything in the wiki here that would be the case. I'm guessing people can ask or whatever and say, hey, I'm looking to get on this server and it's full, but given the fact that these are 16 slot servers, I'm not sure that you're going to run into that, so I think that's part of why they're less worried about it. And, obviously it's not a community that thinks it's getting so much traffic that it can't just operate and let people play when they want to play and worry about it when it comes, I'm sure, just like anything else in the world. Alright, so let's see. So, not quite using all the wool, but getting pretty close. I think we've got plenty of feed around. Everybody's got a bale, and if not, they can go for another day or something. So I'm done in this area of the map. Alright, and so here, this can be deactivated now because there's no more grass for it to process. So we'll just shut that off. Obviously just filled the spinnery. Flour is doing well. And yeah, this is the question. I had refilled some oats the other day. I had taken a truckload over to keep the grain mill running. This is feeding from all the silage that we have, so we've got this and this distributing. So you can see it's got almost, not quite 600,000, about 580,000 liters left to process. So that should do pretty well, and we're already at July, so we'll likely be at the point where we can do something different later. I'm now over here at Lomeric's farm, so I'm gonna try to get going on that and get the olives moving. Alright, so I've got the width set, and we are harvesting, as you can see. So here, kind of the more normal time. You know, usually I'm starting up pretty early in the day, so it's a little bit later than normal, just given all the other things going on that need to happen, but without having to jump in and do things on Nav's farm, just having to work on J Dude's farm this morning. And with that work taking all of 7 minutes, I was able to get on here pretty quickly. So that bodes well for getting things wrapped up and moving along. So we've got several rows of trees that are pretty short here. So it is interesting to me, because I don't know that much about olive production, but I've certainly seen situations or things where they basically shake the trees, and I think there's even implements in the game that allow you to kind of wrap like a platform around the bottom of the tree of kind of some stiffer fabric, and it basically then just funnels things into the middle. Obviously, those are individual trees as opposed to rows like this, but when I've seen that, the trees are significantly larger. Like, they'd be, I mean, not that these are small. I mean, if we get down here, you can see that they're still, you know, decent size. I mean, that harvester is up in the air. So I apologize about it sometimes jumping in and out of the harvester. I haven't quite figured out why it does that. I think it's as I come up on other buildings, I think it's the way the camera works, that if the building is anywhere within the sight line of where I have the camera and there's something between where I'm flying at and the harvester, it just immediately jumps into the harvester. Let's see, I'm already having GPS problems this morning where this thing is locking up on me and you know, insisting that it needs to not turn, even though I've unlocked the GPS from being locked onto the line. So I should be able to go up and down. We've got 60 or 58%. So even though the rows are getting a little bit longer, I'm hopeful I can make it. If not, I'll have a little bit to do over. So I continue to think on my FM direction, and does it make sense? And so, as I talked about when I was over on J. Rodeo's farm there is something to be said for the stability of knowing that, hey, I can work when I want to work because I can build my farm up in a way that, you know, fills however many hours I want to fill. So there is that added benefit, because right now there is a little bit, you know, not that it would have taken me that long on Nav's farm. It's still like 15 minutes sometimes on a given day, although I think this would have been a day that the animals would have needed to be fed. It was kind of getting up there with the chickens and the pigs, that it was kind of getting to that midpoint. I might have been able to let it run another day, maybe two. But, you know, and getting more silage into the TMR mixer, because it still had room for probably 170,000 liters, but having moved 20 bales or whatever it was in, at that point, I had decided that was enough for that day, because it would certainly get things, keep things running until I could come in again, and then I was thinking, you know, I'd have more time today or the next day for sure. Because after this, we're basically into winter. The only thing left here on Lameric's farm between now and some work in the spring would be going ahead and pruning the grapes over there. So I think it says I can do that tomorrow to April. I'm thinking I could actually do it today, since obviously we harvested yesterday. I think the vines are able to be pruned immediately. I think he was just spreading things out a bit to give me some space and not make it look like it had to happen at that point. But it's also possible. I'll have to take a look at the schedule or the calendar if I want to do that. But I think it would still be okay because November's still in fall, and I'm pretty sure the custom crop calendar that FOC uses has got basically operates in the seasons. So the growing, planting cycles are all right in those 3 months and don't really overlap that way. So we'll see. So I think it was just more him like wanting to keep olives clear and not make it a competition for my time. Even though I've explained, like, I usually will focus on the thing that is a specific month first, because I know that means that is the window for that, and I don't want to miss the window, so I do that, and then if I have additional time, I jump in on the rest. Alright, so we did make it. Did get to 89, but didn't get to 90, so that's alright. So let me go find a trailer. Found the trailer over by the TMR mixer. I'm hoping it's not loaded with TMR. I suppose if it is, I could always get that over to... Let me turn on my lights before everyone gets mad at me. I'm just able to, you know, I mean, it's not like the game is so dark that you can't see, so I'm just perfectly fine running around without lights. Whoops, I didn't realize this had anything on the front. Well, at this point we're good. I'll drop it if I need to. Ooh, it does have something here, so let me see, because I'm not sure. Well, I can use the trucks, at least the trailers. I would think they were too high, but let me try that. So this is a lot louder, obviously, but to me, as far as fitting together, these seem way higher than what I can get into normally. So I'll kind of put it in the right place, assuming it'll work, because if it doesn't, I've got to move it anyway. But let's go take a look. So we're on row 3, because that's the thing I want to make sure. I guess I can turn this off so I can move faster. But we shall see if we back up to this, if it'll let us dump in. It does. So, a little bit of Farm Simulator magic, because you can see, like, this is clearly dumping through the side of the truck. But, hey, if it works, that makes it easier. So I'm going to go put that tractor away. Yeah, I'm not sure if he uses that tool to shove these pallets, gosh, I cannot think of the word today, if these pallets over or not, because he doesn't have, that I'm aware of, any kind of a bunker silo or something, which I think is what that is normally used for. But if you look at the sugar that's sitting over there, which I don't understand why it's not being taken into the pallet and bale warehouse, but maybe there's some filling there that has happened. Alright, so back here, but now that I've learned this, so once again, kind of continuing to learn on this farm, and that is the benefit. The other benefit on the farmhand side is things that I'm less familiar with here. You know, I kind of get to try out and learn about. That's how I learned about dairy the first time within Farming Simulator. I had never done animals, and certainly not cows with the complexity with TMR and all of that, until I worked as a contractor and eventually really a farmhand for a massive dairy operation that was running on FS19. He had 6 dairy barns, and that was basically what the entire farm was geared toward. I mean, he would grow crops that would allow him to get the material, the straw he needed. So, I mean, you know, he'd sell crops and so forth, because we'd be growing grain to get straw, but the purpose was still to get the straw to put in the TMR mixers. And at that point in FS19, there was a mod that I really did enjoy. I thought it was great, and it's not made a comeback in FS22, which is really sad. But they were these smaller TMR mixers that produced about 90,000 liters of TMR each, that you'd be able to place next to your each cow shed. So we had 6 TMR mixers, 6 barns. Basically, you'd have to go around and keep them all filled, move the TMR from the mixer into the barn. Lots of work. But, and at that point in FS19 with the sheds we had, we were also having to water the cows, so you were going to fill up a tanker with a bunch of water. So yeah, there was a lot going on. But the important thing was, that's how I learned how to do cows, and so there was a little bit less risk or just discomfort or frustration, because if you're doing it in your own operation and you suddenly can't figure something out, or it's taking a while, or you make a poor decision and you buy something and you don't need it, and in environments like this, it's not like you can again revert to a saved game and say, oop, I made a mistake there, I won't do that, I want to do something else. I mean, you can sell something, but with the game mechanics the way they tend to work and so forth, many times you're selling something and it's at most you're getting 50% of what you paid for. So there's a cost there of this implement won't work or whatever. So with equipment like this, my point is, now I know, hey, this can dump in to a regular Randion or whatever those trailers, the brand of those trailers are. Because certainly if I'm an FM and I have a farm, those are the trailers I'm getting, at least one of them to have 150,000, because I'm going to be able to haul as much as I can haul instead of doing things in pieces. Now we'll see. I think I'm going to be far too close to 50% here, so I think we're already at the point where just basically every other row, every 2 rows, we come back to the truck and empty, and then do 2 more. And, the hope is that obviously, even at the longest position, I can still go ahead and go up and down the row. And I think I can. I don't think I've had a problem. But aside from the fear of being able to plant things straight with olive trees or grapes, I mean, this is something I could do. The thing I have to be aware of is, as we've determined when I was working the grapes the other day, let's see, because I went in on row 4, so I need to go to row 6. Because I would have come back on row 5. Let's see, I may be too close, so it may get hung up on the trees. So yeah, let's do that. But I was going to say, I could put these on my farm too, and have these to do, and at least I know how that works. But, realistically, you're just talking about a 1-tier production with most of this. I mean, with grapes, you can turn them into raisins, which then go into cereal. So you're kind of getting into a little bit more depth. But olives, I think, just go into an oil mill and become olive oil, and that's it. And I do know that it just takes forever to be able to even pay for what you've already done. Lameric and I had talked about this, about, when I explained, wow, this is the biggest olive or grape operation I've ever seen or worked on in an FS multiplayer. And I think there's other people around FOC that have even bigger operations in this regard. I'm just not involved with them at this point, but and he just explained it was one of those things as he was growing, it was just, well, it's something else to do. It's, he had the money and he's like, all right, what else can I do that is different? But, as we can see, there's no H key here to go ahead and hire an AI worker like we had for the cotton or out in the fields. So if I ever went that route, I think it would be a later crop. Like I would have to start. But I do find it interesting. I think a good production chain in the economy here and the way it works for the farm might be to kind of focus on it as a cotton operation, and then have the spinnery have a tailor shop and kind of walk through that whole chain. Because you can work the spinnery with either cotton or wool. So obviously the other option would be what is happening on J. Rodeo, where he's running his spinnery with just a bunch of sheep. But then you're dealing with getting the grass and this and that. And it does seem like everybody is using a BGA with silage, and so there does always seem to be grass work. There's a lot of options, it seems, that are pretty standard, but the benefit of working as a farmhand for a period of time is you get that experimentation time to be able to figure out and see what folks are doing and kind of give yourself some time to think about it and learn just as you would in real life, which once again is the wonderful thing about a good simulation, is that you're simulating being in that role, but it's obviously a much less risky prospect than having to do it in real life, which would be the only other alternative if there wasn't some simulation that you could play in, if your only ability to do it is to just do it within real life. Alright, so at this point, I think we're definitely going to hit 50%. So, I mean, like in theory, I guess I probably am showing there that I could have gone down the entire way. I don't know why this just seems like it's further away than the grapes, but clearly it is, because I just feel like it's going to take me too long to get to the truck. Oh, I'm not far enough back yet. It's not hitting the point where it's saying it'll take them. But yeah, I'm in no danger using this of ever filling it up, that's for sure, because I'm not going to get 150,000 liters of olives out of this grove. But yeah, the challenge ends up being, as I was starting to say, like doing this, I then walk away from the I can build a bigger farm highly reliant on automation, because I have to do these manually. But the flip side of it is also why he said he decided to do it on his farm is, the grapes and the olives, they don't wither. So if you just decide, hey, I'm too busy this year, I mean, other than foregoing the income that you would get from harvesting them and so forth, and you having equipment that's sitting around that you paid for that you're not getting any value out of, there's no harm. So they're an easy crop to just have, and then you work it when you want to work it. So that's kind of how he's approached this, and so that has certainly helped to educate me a little bit on how to think through if this makes sense. Because when I did model olives and grapes, I think olives were the worst. I think it basically took 15 years before you repaid the cost of just planting the olive trees. And that isn't, I bought the harvester, I bought whatever. So it's even a longer payback, and it's just because trees and the vines are expensive. I think grapes were a little quicker. I think it was 9 years. But still, when you think about that, that's a big commitment even at 1 day, 1 month a day. I mean, when you're talking about 15 years, you're talking about, you're coming up on, 200 days of real time before you're even repaying what it cost you to plant the trees. And that's just kind of running the model of, per acre, what you get out of an olive grove. and what your yield ends up being typically. So obviously, if you were running precision farming, and I'm assuming precision farming impacts this too, so if you have a higher yield soil that these happen to go into, but obviously in this environment, there is no precision farming. So you'll have to, just deal with whatever the yield is, so it would be much closer to that. But now that I mentioned precision farming, that does bring up something I honestly haven't thought about for a long time, which I think bodes well for the fact that, yes, I have not, after a month here, been lamenting the fact that, oh my god, it's terrible that precision farming isn't here. I've certainly come to appreciate, once again, the game just without that dynamic, because I think there's enough to offset any of that in how things work and how things are done. So probably the last thing I want to cover, is kind of a good segue from that, is those type of things that FOC has changed from the base game that I'm not aware of and so forth. So I had mentioned in the competition, that there is a competition coming up in August. Well, in the discussion about that, or the announcements about that, the leadership of FOC made a comment about the FOC mods. And if you remember, when I went through the mods, there were some kind of black box mods that I'm like, unless I decide to take the time to go look at the code and see what they do, I won't have a clue what they do, because it's not like you can test and tell easily. And even looking at the code, it might, I'm well aware that it might be like, I still can't figure out what it changed, because it might just overlay things or replace things, and then you're sitting there having to do like a difference comparison between, okay, what's base and what's not. Well, so what they did share in that comment is there are changes that are done in the FOC mods that adjust the base game farming simulator sets. So there were things like animal pens, for example, I guess in base game are limited to 10 animal pens, and FOC increases that to 40. And I'm doing this from memory, so I may have this off. But then I think the other thing they mentioned is productions are normally capped at 60, and they've raised that in FOC to 100. So that basically that's how you can have servers that have as much on them as they do. Now again, I don't know that I would have noticed that there weren't 10 animal pens in total, but I do know for a fact I did not know that those limits existed in Farming Simulator at all. I mean, it's a basic assumption that at some point the game is going to tell you can't do something. The one I was well aware of that I think is pretty common if you do Farming Simulator for any length of time is there is a maximum number of trees that you can have on a map. So, there's typically mods out there and have been for FS19, and there is one for FS22 as well. I think I've seen it, but since I'm not a map designer, nor do I do logging, I'm never really worried about it. It's like the map designer has to worry about the tree limit if they want to put more trees on the map to begin with, and then I would never have more trees than when I started on a map because I'm not planting them to do anything. I was aware of the tree limit, but beyond that, you can infer that, well, there's logically something, and if nothing else, there's going to be my system's going to just explode because my computer won't be able to handle a map with 100 cow barns on it or something, for example. And obviously, animal pens must be more involved because the limit is 40 versus 100 for productions. And once again, logically, as I think through that, I mean, an animal pen has moving objects. It has things the game has to take into consideration, where productions are just basically black boxes with calculations. Put this product in, I'll give you this product out, and I do it at this rate. Where a barn has, you walk up to the dairy barn, as I did quite often, especially when ending an episode in FSN, I'd be standing next to the dairy barn with the cows moving around in the background. Put 100 of those on the map, and all of them have 40 or 50 cows running around them in large cow pastures. Like, that's a lot of animation or things to keep track of. And yes, they're not in camera view. I'm sure there's some performance savings and whatever that happens, but the game, I'm sure, in the background at a minimal level is doing some sort of tracking for those things being there. So there's an understanding, with just my understanding of technology, like, yes, at some point you're going to hit the processing limit of your hardware, and you're not going to be able to do that. It's just kind of the same reason you can only make maps so large and so complex and so forth. Alright, well, the good news is, even though we've probably added 10% of the rows, like, we're still just at 53% with 2 runs up and down. So, I mean, we might not even be at 60% by the time I get down, before I even get to the long part. But regardless, I will be doing that off camera, because at this point I've shared with you what I've got to share. So I am going to do the olives. I may look at, just because it's a curiosity thing, again, to me it's that learning opportunity that I've got being here on the farm, where I don't have to sit there and take time and test. I can just go look and try. I can see if I can prune now, and then I can make that decision of, hey, do I just want to get that work done now, and then I'm off until whatever work he decides to give to me. And there is a possibility that I may get the same kind of note from him that I got from Nav, which is, hey, it's been great. You've done a great job for me, but I don't need you anymore. I don't think so, because we were just talking last year about whether I would be around this year. And, the conversation that I guess I haven't shared on these videos yet, I did reach out to him about the fact that he had mentioned some crop sharing option once I was into my 2nd year, and obviously this is my 3rd year now, and we hadn't talked about it, and he said he was kind of waiting to see if I was interested. But then, contrary to what I thought, it doesn't sound like he had really had an idea of what to do. He was just like, what are you thinking? And was kind of willing to probably then give me his feedback, like, yeah, that sounds fair, or no, I'm not willing to do that. But I don't really know how that would be structured. But at this point now, because I've suddenly gone into the realm of maybe I will become an FM sooner rather than later, I don't know that I want to waste his time with that discussion unless I really decide not to go ahead. So I think at this point, if he raises it, surely I'll be upfront and say, well, I'm thinking about this, but, yeah, I'd have to compare and contrast. Yeah, is this going to make more sense or not? But in the end, any kind of crop sharing, the output of that for me is more cash in my bank balance. And as we've talked about to FM or not to FM, the whole point of a cash balance is to use it at some point. Otherwise, you're just accumulating a bunch of numbers for nothing. And that's why people are like, how could you not become an FM? Well, because my goal isn't to worry about what my bank balance is or what I'm doing with it. It's just to play the game and to be in here and picking olives and whatever, and not have to worry about anything other than I'm picking olives and I need to get this task done. But just as in any human endeavor, whether it's work or entrepreneurship or whatever, looks like I can shift over a little bit. I'm not quite lined up on these trees. So it might just make it a little easier to get on and off the rows. There's the desire to have a little more control, a little bit more whatever, but if I go that route, then going through all the effort of figuring out how we're going to crop share it seems unfair for me to put him through that. So I'm not pressing it right now because, he was busy the day we talked and he said, we'll talk later. And I told him on it, which was honest at that point. And I wasn't at the point I am now with the FM when I said this. So that wasn't the driver of the statement, but it was, hey, it's no rush. I'm just trying to understand. And that's been several days ago at this point. So again, I don't know his life. I don't know whatever, but we haven't hit a weekend yet, so it may be that he's going to think about it on a weekend and then get back to me after that. And if he does, then we'll have the discussion, and I'll certainly, if it makes sense in the course of that discussion, to say, yeah, maybe let's not go through all that effort because I may only work for you for another year or two, so it might not be worth it. But in the end, I'm sure it's just going to be a calculation. I guess the way I envision crop sharing, if I was to propose that or someone was to approach me and say, hey, I'm been helping you for years and I know you're making all kinds of money, can I get some of that? I view it as literally a profit sharing thing with farms. It's just crop sharing, and because that's what you're sharing, because that's where the profits come from. But at the end of the day, it's profit sharing. So just like profit sharing within a corporation, which I'm very familiar with because I've had those plans at various employers, it's, hey, if we make a profit, you get X percent of it is the simplest way to do it. There's complexity that, hey, it's attached to performance measures, whatever. So, that you could go ahead and do something similar here, that if you work a minimum of X number of hours, so again, you're, because there certainly would be a danger to a farm manager to say, yeah, we'll do profit sharing and I'm going to give you 10% of the profits of the farm. And then that FM just suddenly starts finding all kinds of reasons why they're busy and, works 2 hours on the farm, but then suddenly is getting, let's say you make $1 million in profit, and then they're suddenly like getting $100,000, but they only worked 2 hours, so their pay on the farm for work was $16,000. So I'm just taking a peek. Whoop, that's not what I wanted. Because now I'm wondering, did I miss some rows? I don't think I did. I think I can go here. Let's see. Yeah, so as long as I don't have any yellow lines. I know I need to be on an even number. I do remember that. I just was like, did I miss 12? But I was like, no, I think I came off 12, 13. So there could, and in a corporation, it's more like you have to be full-time, would be the comparison there. And then consequently, too, it's, you need a good performance review, you need whatever, and then, like, maybe the division has to hit their budget or exceed their target profit, and only then do you get profit sharing. So it could be one of those, once again, to protect themselves from, hey, I'm having a slow year or something didn't work, that, hey, if we make less than $300,000, there is no profit sharing. But after that, this is how it works. To some degree, some of that complexity certainly does not apply in Farming Simulator, because what you don't have at this point, and I think that's what FSN was trying to model but just did a miserable job of it, is the complexity of the economic supply and demand model, where there is a reality, and we see it in the U.S. all the time, and why the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, will provide subsidies to farmers sometimes. Corn's a typical one, where there's more corn produced than is really needed by far, and we export a lot and so forth, but just because there's this glut of supply, the market price of corn would be substantially lower than what would be sustainable for farmers to do it for. Like, they couldn't do it at a profit for the cost it takes in inputs and to get the corn out of the ground. So the USDA basically guarantees a price to some degree. And again, I may be misunderstanding this a little bit because I am on the outside in. I'm not on a farm. I've not been in a farming family and so forth. But my understanding of how it works is they subsidize corn. And so they either give farmers just a straight out, hey, you get X dollars per acre, which has obviously been calculated out to some level of, hey, this means they're adding $10 a bushel per what you should be getting off of an acre of land when you plant corn. Or they just, could apply it that way. Like, hey, at the minimum it's going to be $35 per thousand or something, or per hundred weight, or however they do it in the commodity space and so forth. So there's a lot of ways to structure it, but basically that's my point. Depending on how complex we wanted to get here, it's still a calculation, but the likelihood in Farming Simulator of, say, the olive market just collapsing, like, it isn't there. The game's always going to let you sell olives. It may not let you sell olives at a certain level, but it also isn't suddenly going to basically go to zero. It just doesn't do that. Like, it's not an economic... It doesn't have a robust economic simulation of some sort where there's depressions and pandemics that suddenly all the restaurants are closed and we're not using olive oil anymore, and so the need for olives has vanished. It's there's nothing like that in the game. So to some degree we're protected from having to worry about those risks and model them versus real life, where a company will absolutely be like, hey, if we don't hit X% operating profit level, like, then there's no profit sharing, because that anything below that we can barely afford to stay in business. But there just isn't stuff like that. So all that to say that, yes, I'm not looking to have him go through a ton of effort, where right now it looks like I'm probably... I realistically would probably say I may work for him next year and then may make the leap, because I'll have enough to start. Part of what I baited, because as I said, like, one of the things I might like to do is be on this map. One of the things I did peek at is the challenge on this map. So let's go look at that. If you look at this map, it is 100% owned for all intents and purposes. My understanding are these two fields were owned by someone, and they terraformed them to such a level that they're almost unusable. Like, someone would have to spend tons of money to fix them, which is why none of the existing FMs on the map have picked those up, because they're not going to spend that money, because it's just a cost. You're never going to earn anything back off of doing that, and so FOC would need to fix it at their cost, and maybe they just don't do that. It's kind of like, hey, you guys messed up your map, you messed up your map. So so the point being, there's no land available here, but there has been discussion when I talked about it, like, oh, this is where I was at, I might want to make a home here. Lomeric himself said, like, he may be willing to part with some of the pieces of land he owns, and so I was honestly thinking these fields here he owns. But yeah, what I wasn't sure, so yes, this appears to be his grass. So this is where he'll collect grass from. So, he may not be willing to part with that. But again, he has other, this field is grass. So it's just how much does he really do here. So he's got grain silos and stuff, or fermenting silos, I mean, nearby. But to me, like, if I was to try to do something, that would be probably a logical place, because if you zoom in here, there's open areas around. So if you look at the farmlands, like with 38, you get all this, with 37, you get all this. Like, to me, I could put my yard around the field without having to do anything with the field, and it gives me fields nearby. So right now, that's where my head's at. Is just kind of opening up the discussion if I decide to go the FM route and I decide I want to be on this map. And right now I think this is still my first choice. Just again, because it's an active group, and they're at least online and voice chat, and to me that would be fun. Whether we're farming together or not, at least I get an opportunity to chat with people and just enjoy some conversation and so forth. And that's the reason I enjoy multiplayer communities, aside from just being able to keep a server running and have the reality of time is passing. And it's not a single player fakery that I'm doing of that. Alright, so I think I just came off 16, so I think, yeah, I'm going to have to go to 18. I need to move this truck. I keep going way too far now. But at this point, next time I need to do that. But I think the discussion would be, hey, are you open to eventually selling these off? And I wouldn't need them all to begin with. I'd start with one. And then he can keep doing what he's doing with the others. So for example, like right now, the middle one, it doesn't look like he's growing anything on the middle one. So maybe that would be a good thing, like, hey, sell this one off, and then eventually I'd want to buy the other two, perhaps, and that would give me an opportunity to run something a little bit bigger, but on fields that are close together, and at least looking at them from a bird's eye view. I have not gone over to that area of the map specifically right now and looked at them to really scope it out. Like, all right, what would it take? Are there more trees separating things that would make it difficult? Whatever. But that would be what I would look at, and if they would be willing to do that, then this might make sense. But if not, I'm not sure that there's much else I want to look at. I was up here on 2425, but, this person doesn't own a ton, and so this would basically be like, other than this field here, like, they'd have nothing left. So I can't imagine they'd be willing to do much, where Limerick is, if not the largest landholder on the map, pretty close. I mean, the blue farm here is probably close. You've got this one inside that is much smaller, but and the yellow farm is not that. They have a lot of fields, but they don't have a lot of acreage. So Limerick is definitely the land baron on the map here. So the fact that he's indicated he's willing to part with fields because he just frankly isn't working them all. They just kind of picked them all up so that they didn't have auctions going on for them when they wanted other fields, because I think, again, they wanted to consolidate, for example, around what they have here. Because the other difference that this creates in my thinking and how I've played the game and so forth is, if I'm doing a big operation, I can certainly see the value of not making things more complicated than they need to be. So part of what I've said is, I enjoy terrain, and in Hobo's Hollow, hey, maybe I wouldn't like these fields here in the center because it's just flat. But in the end, like, now that I've worked these fields for him and worked the cotton and so forth, like, I can see the efficiency of having 11, 12, and 13, for example. Because that is actually works quite well for what he's doing. But I also understand, like, this is where he's got his yard. He's not going to sell me land that then requires him to demolish everything he has and move. So to me, an outlier out in the corner, might be a possibility that he'd be willing to entertain. But in the end, all of that land together, just the land itself, is like $5 to $6 million. I think it's under 6, because I don't think anything's over 2 million, but I think there's a few parcels that are like 1.7, 1.4, so they're up there. So they're basically between 3 to 6. They're probably maybe over 5 together. So, which is why I wouldn't do it right away, or I'll be farmhand for quite a long time to try to get that full amount, because then I'd have land and then I have to buy equipment. So to me, it would make sense, buy one plot, determine once again, do I want to get in and work it, or do I work some of it and then let AI finish? Because once again, I think they're all they're all decent size. So that's 62 acres. Now again, that's not field. This one's 76 and this one's 53. So I mean, if I'm just going through that, I basically have 200 acres over there. Again, not all field. Maybe it's 75% of that, so 150 acres of field. But that would be by far, by a good amount, because I had about 110 acres, 120 acres on Seneca. And that was a lot to work myself. Again, I'm going to move the truck over. And so, but if I can use AI, that changes the equation a lot. I mean, because we had, probably 80 or 90 acres of, I'm not sure where I want to put this. I guess because right now it's like when I come off on those rows, that this truck is in the way. So that's the downside. It's kind of big for the space I have here. Alright, I'm on 19, so I'll need to go back onto 20. But that's kind of where my head's at right now. So if I was to, without doing any more research, without figuring out the economics and the dynamics, so there's a little bit of me that's like, that's part of the fun. Like, I know I would just run the operation at the level I could run it. So it's one of those, like, if I bought the land and I could barely do anything for 2 or 3 years, that's what it would be. And then I could, sit and supplement if I wanted to speed up the earning power and keep being a farmhand here while I'm doing that. I mean, the other dynamic that I'm not really considering, because I don't, to me it just isn't how I operate in my life. I don't jump into things before I can afford to do them, because then, I mean, it just lowers your risk exposure substantially. And the profit is still there, but there's operations that, hey, you can lease the land from me and I'll let you use my equipment, and all you got to do is repair and whatever. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll go that way because, oh wait, I'm on a row. I thought I was getting on 20 and I'm not, so let me back out of here, turn this off, go faster. I was turning into 20, but clearly I didn't realize it had locked on 19, so that was the one I came off of. So, I could do something and then, because the limiting factor would be, hey, I can barely afford my land, so I really can only buy this equipment, and so I can't do anything substantial. Like, the first year or two, I could be like, well, I need to borrow harvesters and whatever. What's it going to cost me? But to some degree, my point is I'm willing to jump in maybe without knowing the economics entirely and just saying, hey, I'll figure it out as I go along. It's just not normally the way I operate. Normally, I'd have the business plan fully fleshed out. And so it just seems totally foreign to me. And you know, you could make the argument, well, that might be fun. It'd be a fun experience. I just don't know that it'd be as fun for me as it might be for others who are, you know, willing to do it. And it does make it sound like, oh my God, you're not spontaneous. You're dull, boring. What I certainly do things without fully thinking them out in some cases, just not financial endeavors. You know, because if I feel confident, like, yeah, the downside's pretty small here, let's just try it. I love trying new things, but in any event, I don't have that part of it fully fleshed out in my brain, obviously, because I can't talk through it. This is really kind of, again, the stream of consciousness that is what I normally do as I'm just going up and down the fields and telling you exactly what I'm thinking of at that moment. So, but that would be what I would look at. Otherwise, you know, if you said, nah, I really need those to run my operation, you know, I assume he'd propose, hey, these are the fields I'm willing to part with, and I'd have to look and see what I thought. But right now, I'm just not seeing anything else that jumps out to me. Like, to me, when I looked at the map yesterday after I finished recording for the video, but was still working the grapes, and so in between, was like, well, let me think about this and see what I think might work. You know, that was kind of where my eyes drifted immediately. Was like, oh, this is interesting. And normally I'd be like, I don't want to be there because there's nothing nearby. There's no sell points. Like, I have to cart things a good ways across the map to get them anywhere. But that is the nice thing of the dynamic of having a trailer that will put 150,000 liters in it and not creating this artificial pain of, well, no, you can only move 80,000 liters, even though that truck in the base mod is 100,000. Like, we're gonna make it harder there. You know, that I can see doing. But it's interesting, even that dynamic, and I keep thinking, oh, I'm going to end this soon because it's super long and whatever, but as I always say, you can listen or you will have walked away by now. I'm finding a strange result here, and I don't know what the why of it. So that is what I'm strangely intrigued with, is why I'm feeling this way. Is not that I'm saying I'd love to go back to 80,000 liters, but I almost have a feeling that I don't care how many times I need to, how many loads it is and how long it takes, because I'm just enjoying my time here so much compared to what clearly was happening to me in FSN, where if I had to haul 20 loads of something, I was almost angry about it. And again, maybe it was this subconscious thing of, like, you're artificially hobbling me for really no purpose other than your grand vision of, you think this is fun, and we've told you this isn't fun, and the reality that was supposed to make it fun hasn't materialized yet, and we've been promised it for years, and I don't believe you anymore. I don't believe we're ever going to see it. So I'm irritated about living in a constraint that the benefit you're telling me about isn't there. We're here because everything's kind of fully built and you know what you're in. Like, I go back to when I was hauling, I think he had 2.4 million liters of soybeans for J-Dude. So I was doing that a day or two ago. Even with the large trucks, that's still 15 plus trips, I think, if I'm doing my math right. Let me see. I think I'm on 22. I need to go. Need to get to this map. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I am on 20. I guess No, I can't be on 20 because I went down 19. I'm on 22. Because I had gone down 19 and said, oh, no, I needed to set on 20. So now I need to get to 22. Alright, which is there. So, sorry about that. Let me get myself going. I don't think this is going to work yet. I'm going to say the truck's going to be a bit in the way, but hopefully I'll get enough movement. Alright, let me manually move around here, because clearly this is not going to move as sharply as I need. Alright, this might work now. Make sure we're getting olives. We are. Alright, so I'm good there. And yeah, that looks right. So it's interesting, because it looks like it's showing me that grass is ready. I mean, the grass is ready to be harvested, but it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, so 15 truckloads, like something that large was enough to turn me off of doing the work in FSN. And for whatever reason it is, and this is what I'm saying, like it surprised me that I was not having the same feelings that I would. I mean, certainly don't get me wrong. I mean, it took a while. I mean, because it took, I think, like 2 hours to do that hauling. But it made sense to me, is the best I can put my finger on as to why I'm feeling that way. Because to me, yes, I mean, sure, I could have made a lot less trips if they let a truck hold 1 million liters. But to me, that's a bridge too far. Like, it's like, then it becomes arcadey, and it's not a sim to some degree. I mean, you have to have some sort of limitations. And there are plenty of them that I'm starting to discover in Farmers Only Club with, you know, hey, they've made the productions more challenging, they've slowed things, they've sped things up, they've done whatever. But just the amount of thinking and work that has gone into balancing things, like, that is what I know was missing over in FSN, because I've had that discussion about decisions being made, and when I started over here in Farmers Only Club and we've started this series, I said that was the big reason. The taxes, to me, there was no balance. When I modeled it, I could see massive problems economically, and the response I got from leadership is, well, I've done the work, I've modeled it, and I'm happy with the model. Okay, great. You're happy with the model. You don't need to live within the model. You're simply the man enforcing the model, you know, to use the term again in the U.S., you know, the man's got it in for me. Meaning the government. That's what that is operating on. If you're taxing me, you're the government. And I'm getting no benefit. I talked about that. I'm getting no services. I'm getting nothing. You're simply pulling money from me for no reason whatsoever, other than you think it's entertaining, and I'm telling you it's not, so don't do it. And, you know, they're unwilling to listen to that. And here, like, they don't have any of that artificial crap. It's simply, this is the economic model, and we create the pressures in the normal supply and demand and pricing models and so forth. And to me, that feels way, way better, because that's how the world operates. You know, and again, I'm not trying to get sucked back into the FSN rabbit hole, but it's just, unfortunately, you know, it's the comparison that's there. Like, I get the argument is, yes, but we have taxes in the real world, because that's literally the words that have been said there. You're right. But for taxes to make sense, like, again, as human beings, if you were doing the same thing to me in the real world, where you were just taxing me to take money, to just decrease the money I had for no discernible reason, I would not be happy with that either. We pay taxes in the real world because we understand that the rest of the things around us, police protection, fire protection, exist off of taxes. Public schools exist off of taxes. We don't have those things in FSN, nor should, in a farming simulator, nor should we. This isn't an economic simulator. That's what you play Civilization for. If I want that, I go play that. I'm playing farming simulator. Focus on the farming. And so to me, that's the best thing I can determine of why I don't find it as angering or irritating as I did in FSN, is because it all makes sense. And so I'm operating in an environment that has logic to its existence and isn't half-baked, which is the other problem. We all understand alpha, beta, and whatever of a product, but at some point, it's, pardon the directness, but it's shit or get off the pot. Like, finish the thing, or just acknowledge it's never going to be finished, and and don't play here unless you just want to be in a perpetual state of never having anything completed and feeling perpetually frustrated that of all the promise that exists but will never be realized. Because again, waiting 10 years in real life or 20 years, I'm not willing to do that, and I don't think most people were. And so, I've heard from folks, hey, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, we didn't have this. And it's one thing if you're building toward it, but to me it still sounds like I didn't get into the conversation because I didn't understand the psychology of, or wasn't in the psychological feelings that I'm talking about now, of like, how would I have reacted if I was in that environment? I mean, I love history. I'm a student of history. And so absolutely part of what I really love about it is you're reading about these experiences and things that people did and how they had to cope and whatever. We're reading about the history of New York City right now. Giant book. I think it's like 1,200 pages, and it only covers from the start up to like 1898. So a lot of detail, but just stuff that I didn't know and whatever. And so you're in this time period, and it's like, wow, gosh, in today with what I know and whatever, God, that would infuriate me. But you try to put yourself in that spot, like, yeah, but maybe I would have been okay with it because this. So in this case, that's my thing. Like, they talked about, I think they didn't have all these productions, like they didn't have productions at all available to be used until like 6 or 9 months ago, I think is what the conversation was. And I was like, wow, yeah, that is a long time. Like, we had those a lot earlier, but we just had base game stuff. But I think, again, because of the logic and I think the transparency here, the messaging was likely, yes, we don't have them, but this is what we're doing. Like, we're trying to model this. We're going to have 3 tiers. We're going to increase the pricing. We're going to change the speed of production. Like, it would have been this collaborative effort as a community of, here's what we're trying to do to bring this to you. And then they continue to let you know, like, here's where we're at. And more importantly, because that's all they're working on are these things, they don't have all the other distractions of just a bunch of made up things, that you make faster progress and you're not in this beta mode forever. Because best I can tell is, I think Farmers Only started with FS22, so, at least in earnest. And so it's been growing from that. And so I think my feeling at that point would be, sure, I'd love to do this, but it's coming, and wow, it sounds like it's going to be wonderful. And I would have been in an environment up to that point where instead of being perpetually excited and then disappointed because it never happened, that I would have the track record as I already have now of, yes, I have to wait for this. And again, I haven't experienced that in FOC yet. There's not some new capability that I've seen being talked about that, hey, in 3 months we're going to be able to do this, where I could say I'm living it now, and with 100% certainty I can tell you, yeah, this is how it's making me feel. I'm excited, and I have no fear that it's going to happen because they've delivered. But just like walking into any environment in our life, it's the same thing. Like, you can see, yeah, I'm comfortable in this. I have trust is really the focus. I have trust that they're going to do what they say, and that is what was broken time and time again. And eventually you realize, like, you're just being lied to. Like, it's just not going to happen. And at some point you just kind of get sick of the, I'm really sorry, it was more than I thought. You just understand that as soon as they announce something, yeah, it's not going to happen any time in my lifetime, because, there's going to be more complexity than they thought of, even though they're insisting they thought of everything. So that's been the fascinating part to me, and so that is all related to what I was talking about here, in that I would have never put myself, and I would have hated being in that corner on this map in FSN, but I don't have those worries here in FOC, and so to me that was fascinating. It was like, why? Like, it's the same map, the sell points are in the same locations, they're all like they're all far away. Why don't I care? And it's because to me, like, I'm making a decision to live in this space, and I understand that I have to haul things a ways to go, but I also know there's dynamics to not make things difficult just for the sake of making them difficult. They're difficult in the economics, but if I need to transfer things and say I sell an operation, again, I feel I have the control to make decisions of what that farm would be, where I could say, maybe it's a grain farm, maybe I'm making a ton of grain, and I don't have a bakery, a grain mill and a bakery, but I'm selling that to people all over FOC who need grain, and therefore I can just transfer the grain from my silo to their silo, and I don't have to cart it. I have that option. Or, hey, I'm willing to cart it and sell it, but now I have a little bit larger equipment, and it doesn't just feel like I'm being restricted just to make my life difficult, because that's the best way I can explain how I feel, what it was making me feel like. It's like that there's no logic behind you making me miserable. You just seem to like to make me miserable. And that's just stupid. I mean, why would we exist in that environment? So, deep thoughts in Farming Simulator again. Sometimes this happens as I chat through things, but that's where I'm at. So like I said, I'm getting excited and leaning toward, like, yeah, I think I've got a path that makes sense to me, that I think might work for the farm manager thing. And yeah, there's obstacles that may just cut me off at the knees, and Lamerick may not be willing to part with those fields. And again, by the time, like, you will know, like, it will have happened before you even get to this video and hear about it. Or, it will have happened. I shouldn't say you will know it has happened. I mean, you will, I'm telling you, you'll know it's happened because I've told you. Like, so my point being, because these videos are now 2 months plus in the future, by the time you'll see them, I'm not going to wait 2 months to make this decision. Like, I will have acted on this before this video even comes out, which is why I don't ask for feedback here. That's in the single player series that are a little closer to real time, where, I'm filming them a week or two ahead at most, maybe a month, but then when I do a month, I wait and catch up and whatever. But in this case, other than kind of rhetorically asking for feedback so that I can understand and potentially act on it far into the future, I do value everyone's opinion, so I'm not saying don't give me opinions. I just don't want to set unrealistic expectations that, hey, if you tell me do something, and if I agree with you that I should do it, that you're going to see it 3 episodes from now. That's just not how this series works. There's far too much happening in a multiplayer community. I get far too much content to keep it real time, because you wouldn't watch it at that rate. You'd have 4 hours of video a day to get through, and nobody's going to do that. So in any event, but I'm interested and excited about that possibility. And so that's where, like I said, it comes back to, then I'm not going to push Lomeric about the crop sharing thing unless he raises it any further, because pretty much right after I asked him about it, I just kept dwelling on the 2 or 3 people that were like, we'd really like to see you be farm manager. Because again, I don't have anything inherently against being farm manager. I just felt, with what I saw, I was intimidated with the size of all these farms, and like, I can't compete with this. But now that I've lived in the environment long enough, I understand, well, I kind of can. I still can't, because I still don't think, I don't know, and as I've told you guys before, I never say never, because of exactly what's happening here. I mean, in the beginning, I was like, I really felt, as I was telling you guys, I'm not sure that I'm going to become farm manager. I was like, I'm going to be farmhand for 6 months, at least. Well, we're a month in, and I'm already rethinking that because of new learning and new emotions and new feeling. And my belief is, I enjoy being a farm manager. I just didn't think I could do it justice, but now I see a path. And so there's excitement in me for that, because I'm like, well, yeah, this seems viable, and hey, there's this, haven't done that in FOC yet, I don't think. I'm turning my wheel, and there's a button on my wheel mapped, obviously, to the C key, which puts me in cab, so sorry for that, because I know they can be distracting. But again, I don't want to oversell it, that it's this whole new world of possibilities, but to some degree, it is. It would be different. It would allow me to participate in the community differently. Right now I can't make any of those kind of decisions of, I'm going to grow this crop and I'm going to sell it to this person. Like, I'm not in control of that. I'm doing exactly what I said last episode. Like, I'm not, someone else is thinking for me. Lomeric has said, I want olives harvested in October. So I'm here harvesting olives in October. Now again, it's disingenuous to say I have full control over that, because I can only harvest olives when the crop calendar lets me. But so I'd likely, if I had olives on my farm, be harvesting them in October. But like, then what happens with these olives, I'm not involved in any even discussions about that decision, nor should I be in a farmhand mode. That's completely up to the farm manager. That's the world of possibilities that opens up, is, the world is my oyster type of thing, and I can do whatever I want. So I've dragged you along through almost the entire olive grove. For those of you that made it here, once again, an immense thank you for putting up with my word salad and getting this far, and just caring enough about what my crazy brain thinks about to continue to just let it play. I'm sure in the background is what most people tell me. They are playing Farming Simulator, and because I'm not necessarily talking about what I'm doing on the screen, it's an easy series to just let play in the background, and they can listen to me like a radio talk show and nod their head or shake their head in vehement disagreement or agreement, as the case may be, and be entertained and listen to what I have to say. So thanks to those folks who enjoy that part of what I give you here. And as always, if you've liked this video and gotten some enjoyment out of it, I'd appreciate it if you drop the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would please ask you to do so that as this drama continues to unfold and so forth, you can easily get to the content, and you can keep up with what's going on here on the channel. And with that, I will see you next time.